Welcome everyone. My name is Brian Summers. I'm the Managing Director of USTAR, and thank you to Dr. Estabrook and Dr. Nelson for the introductions. We're very excited to have two of the leading lights of political and government circles here with us today, with Mayor Ben McAdams and Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox. We want to have a discussion today about technology and technology innovation, and we also hope to have a little bit of time for some questions from the audience. So, without further ado, we'd love to get started. So first of all, I want to ask a basic question to each of you, which is, why are science, technology, and innovation important to you?
Well, I guess I'll jump in. This mic might be a little hot. It's great to be here, Brian, and thanks to all of you for showing up this morning. It's important for many different reasons. Again, we can talk about the role of government and how government should be playing in this space, but if you look at the new economy, and we don't even know what to call it yet, the post-industrial economy or whatever it is now, the sharing economy, the IT economy, but this space, technology, innovation, science is at the forefront of economic expansion, not just here in Utah, but across the globe. And so the economies that are thriving in the United States all have a huge technology aspect to that growth. And if we want to have jobs for our kids and our grandkids and a high standard of living and giving people the opportunity to achieve the American dream, we have to be really good in this space. I live in a place in Utah where the old economy is leaving, but the new economy hasn't found us yet. And so I see every day the results of living in a place where all my friends' parents were coal miners or worked in the power plants, and a lot of those jobs have gone away. And if you're not innovating, if you're not playing in this space, it's really difficult to make a living right now.
Thank you.
I agree with the Lieutenant Governor. I think this is the world is changing so fast. Moore's Law that talks about how capacity doubles every, for 7 years or something, and it feels like you can almost tangibly feel that today. I'm 43 years old. We're the same age, and
I'll be 43 in a month.
Okay, well, some of the younger people in the room may not understand.
So, some politicians believe in using facts appropriately. Just kidding. We are the same age.
Yeah. Okay. I don't feel like I'm an old guy, but I feel technology changing around me so quickly that I can't keep up. And that exponential growth curve, we're seeing it in real life, where things that are coming out every month and every year are changing so quickly. And I think, so it's exciting and fascinating and scary, I think. And, somebody was saying, I heard somebody say the other day that, we used to raise our kids for the world we know. We're raising kids today for a world that we don't know what it will look like in 10, 20, 30 years. And so it's exciting, and I think it's scary for a lot of people. They don't know what their career is going to look like in 10 years. We know for a fact that a lot of careers will be non-existent in 10 or 20 years. So that's exciting and that's scary. And I think I think the Lieutenant Governor's right. We want to be on the cusp of that. The world's changing, whether we want it to change or not. To be on the cusp of that means that we can be adding value to the global economy and to science and technology innovation. It also means that we're going to be able to hopefully survive this transition into a new economy as we're innovating. So what's the role of government? I think by and large the first role of government is to stay out of your way for the most part. I think one of the best compliments I can get as a mayor is somebody says, well, what does Salt Lake County do? I'm like, well, if we were doing it poorly, you'd know exactly what we do. So I love it when people aren't quite, we do a lot. I love it when people aren't quite sure what we do, because I think our goal is to stay in the background and make sure that trains come and go on time, and our entrepreneur and our business community is able to thrive and innovate and employ Utahns without government getting in the way. But I think what government can do in this space too is to foster an environment where entrepreneurship and technology innovation can be successful, can find the jobs of the future and bring them right here to Utah. But also where we can help that workforce, the retraining of the workforce, help a workforce transition to the new economy is maybe something we can do. One of the things that I hear consistently from businesses is while it's great that we have such low unemployment in the state of Utah, our economy is hot. It's hard for people to find the workforce that they need to grow their businesses. And so making sure there's an education pipeline and a training pipeline is something that I think we can do well. And if we do it well, you won't know that we're doing it.
So you both talked about the economy of Utah being strong, but also there is this transitionary aspect where as we move further away from agriculture and natural resource extraction and some of the other traditional industries that have dominated the state and more towards a service and technology-based economy, how do we help our citizens and the workers, the folks that are being trained to take those jobs, ensure that they have the actual skills to do that, and that the companies that are in that space, the new companies that are being created, will be able to stay in Utah because they have the workforce that's necessary?
Yeah, I'm glad the mayor brought this up, because this, we tend to localize everything. Like, oh, this is a Utah problem. We don't have the trained workforce. I tell you, I travel around with lieutenant governors all across the country, and they're all having this very same conversation right now, that they don't have a trained workforce either. And so this is a critical piece for government to play. I was with someone several months ago who said, when I graduated, he was just retiring. He said, when I graduated from college, I had all of the knowledge I needed for the first 30 years of my career. And I just had to laugh. Now we routinely graduate people who don't have the knowledge they need for the first 6 months of their career, because of the change that's happening so rapidly. So we have to completely rethink the way we educate. I think we've made a huge mistake in our country over the past few years, over the past few decades, I should say, of believing that everyone needs a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. First of all, it's not for everyone, and too often we have kids that think they have to do this, and they get in there, and a year in or 2 years in, they realize it's not for them. They drop out. They have student debt now, and they don't even have the degree that could actually help them get a better job. And so and second of all, the economy is not demanding that. That's not what the economy needs right now. And so I'm very excited with our Pathways program. We're putting a lot of emphasis in this. Youth Star has been very involved, and many in this room, to give opportunities to young people at a very early age. So we have sophomores now that are working towards graduating high school with a certificate in aerospace manufacturing or diesel mechanics, being able to fill these jobs that the economy needs, and they can have great lives and achieve the American dream, raise a family, and not have to go into a lot of debt to do that. But at the same time, we also have to change our mindset about how education works. It can't just be something you do when you're in your teens and early 20s. We need lifetime learners, and we need an education system that supports that. So we're constantly retraining. We're constantly, it is part of work is education. We meld those things together, and the partnerships that we're forming right now between our institutions of higher education, our applied technology colleges, and the private sector to get that education and keep their employees and new employees prepared for what's coming down the pipeline is what's going to save us moving forward.
I would add, it's right that we have local problems that are really part of a national problem. One thing I will say, I think we do a better job in Utah of solving our problems. Even though we have them and a trained workforce as part of those, we want to stay on the cutting edge and stay ahead with that workforce. The state of Utah has done some great work partnering with our community colleges and our applied technology colleges and the private sector to train that workforce or retrain that workforce in real time, and not working towards a bachelor's degree per se, but working towards getting them prepared for the jobs that are in front of them. I think there are a few big ideas out there that we start to see coming to fruition that can help keep us, again, on the cutting edge with this. I think the concept of an inland port, huge idea. And I think if you think about an inland port as a hub of imports, sure, that'll create some jobs. It'll create some good blue-collar jobs, some good-paying blue-collar jobs. But where an inland port is really going to be powerful and a game changer for the state of Utah is those exports. And whether you're an exporter, whether you're making things that are being exported, or whether you're a technology business, just building out that backbone that Utah is a place where global business is transacted, both imports, but we're making things, whether it's aerospace, medical device, and exporting those to a global economy. That inland port really will be a game changer for us. So happy to see our state leading out. It looks like, from what we're seeing, maybe some movement with the city, that we're going to have hopefully find some common ground with the city on moving that forward. It'll be a game changer for the residents of Salt Lake City, for the people of Salt Lake County, and the entire state of Utah. So I think that's a big one that will reshape our entire state, and it'll bring those businesses here. You're going to see more of the aerospace industry, the Boeings, the medical device, the Varian Systems, and the Merit Medicals and the Edwards Life Sciences, more of those coming here. And whether you're an entrepreneur and an innovator in this space, it's so, you probably know this better than I do, but it's so eye-opening to me to see how far these tentacles of these businesses reach and the impact they have. The local companies that have 10% of their business goes to one of these larger companies, and what that is a lifeblood to continuing to foster innovation and entrepreneurship, how important that is. So I think that's a big idea that we got to get right.
Thank you. So we've talked a little bit about workforce development and education, providing workers that existing companies need. Utah is also an entrepreneurial state. It's a small business state. What can we do to help support people that want to create new companies and create new jobs and opportunities and not just necessarily go into existing industries? What are the challenges that are facing entrepreneurs, especially in the science and technology space in the state?
You want to go first? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think there's some things that happen and can continue to happen. I think, what you want is a small business to not spend all of their time thinking about HR compliances and regulations and, what permits do they need to get, and that you've got this incubator space where a lot of that can be turnkey for a business. Once they're a larger company, they're going to hire an HR, a director of HR, and they're going to hire director of compliance. But if in these nascent stages that they don't spend 8 months trying to figure out government boxes they need to check, that's really an obstacle to entrepreneurship. I think we do that well. I think Salt Lake County can step up and do a better job in the Salt Lake Valley. I think we've got leadership in Davis County and Utah County with that. We do have some great things happening in Salt Lake County as well. But some of these incubators where some of that is turnkey, and honestly I think some of that does have to be funded by government because of the greater good that's accomplished with that we have these incubator spaces where somebody can come in and get help on an incorporation and find out what rules and regulations they need, some office space, some space to connect with other entrepreneurs. That's something that I think we are doing and we can do more of to help a lot of these small businesses that are starting up, people coming out, just fresh out of company or out of college and have an idea. How can we help them explore that idea and see if it catches fire without bogging them down with a bunch of government regulations?
Yeah, I think that's a critical piece. I think one of the things we need to do as policymakers is be better at listening to entrepreneurs and learning from them. I was very fortunate. I was able to run a technology company for 10 years, and that has changed the way I work as a policymaker. That really informs what I do and who I am, and that understanding. And I think too often I've noticed there's a disconnect. It is getting a little better, but I talk to our tech community often about getting more involved in policy making. Unfortunately, entrepreneurs aren't wired for government and they hate it, and I don't blame them, because government is not designed to be innovative and disruptive and move quickly, and that's a good thing. I like to say I now have a board of directors of 104 people, and they're all legislators, and they all think they should be the chief executive, and it makes it difficult. If you want to change the law in Utah, you have to wait until January through March, and then you have to go through committee hearings, and you have to convince a majority of the 75 House members who all have their own jobs. This is a part-time deal for them. And look, it's still the best system out there. I'm grateful for it. But if you're somebody who's an entrepreneur, and this is what I miss most about my old life, is I would wake up in the morning with a really good idea, and by the end of that day, we'd implemented that idea. Now I wake up with a good idea, and if I'm lucky 3 years later, we're doing something about it. It's kind of the way it works. And so entrepreneurs are kind of turned off by government and those in the tech sector, when it should be the exact opposite. We need those voices more than ever. If you look at the makeup of the legislature, we have an incredible legislature, and we both served in the legislature. But we don't have a lot of private business people or entrepreneurs or people that work for tech companies. It's very underrepresented. We have a lot of attorneys, and we're both one of those too. So but we need more of that. And so I would encourage this crowd and the people you interact with to find ways to serve and to get more involved, because those voices, we're hearing from the realtors and we're hearing from the medical community, but we need to be hearing from the tech community. We need your voices to be heard to make sure that we're making that difference.
So when we talk about the tech community, in many cases, people sort of immediately default to Silicon Slopes and IT and software. As USTAR, as Dr. Nelson talked about, I mean, we also represent what we call deep tech communities. So I mean, things like aerospace and life sciences and advanced materials and some of these more hardcore scientific pursuits. And so the question that I have for both of you is, how do we make sure that when we talk about the tech community that we are including those deep tech spaces, and also how can we encourage the development of those parts of our tech community so we're not all in what's happening in Silicon Slopes and the IT sector, as important as that is?
Well, I think that's part of my previous comment is we need those sectors. We do that. You're right, Brian. I mean, very often we just say tech, and we all think of somebody coding, at Silicon Slopes or one of those companies, and they're very important. But when you look at the diversity of our economy right now, the life sciences sector, the aerospace manufacturing sector are huge pieces of what's making this state go. And so that's, I think, the way we help policymakers is by getting policymakers in the room with those groups. Some of them are better at it than others, and some of them have lobbyists and can afford that. But to the mayor's point, you shouldn't have to have a full-time lobbyist to be able to communicate and achieve the ends that you're working on. We should be having these conversations with the 2 and 3 person operations and making sure we're hearing from them. But most importantly, making sure that we have an ecosystem, as the mayor mentioned, that allows you to flourish without being bogged down and holding you back. It's the most frustrating thing I hear when I hear from somebody who says, I have this great idea and I've been working on it for years and I've needed this permit for 6 months. That's completely unacceptable, and that's where we can do better.
I want to come back to the concept of an inland port too. So our Silicon Slopes and our entrepreneurs in technology and in digital technology, an incredibly important part of our economy. They don't need a port to export, right? They're doing it digitally. The inland port, to maximize the benefit of that inland port, we are talking life sciences, energy, right? The aerospace, all of this is where you're going to have physical products that need to be picked up and moved to a global economy. So I think that conversation is happening, but if there were ever a time for us to figure out how we connect that, and I do think that, it probably doesn't drive the headlines as much, but I think policymakers understand how important these manufacturers are of advanced sciences and to our local economy. But ever more so, if we want to capitalize on that, we've got to connect. The concept of an inland port shouldn't just be shipping containers, bringing in shoes, to sell in America. It needs to be, how do we export this aerospace, this technology, these hardware, these things that we're making. And coming back to, I guess, the beginning of the conversation about, I think it's very real. I feel it as I'm out in the community, the fear of people who, 20 years ago, they had a single breadwinner who could provide for a family and send their kids to college. Today, it's two breadwinners it takes to do the same thing. And in the future, they're not sure what they can do. That fear is very real. And we know the fear is justified as well. The trucking industry, what's that going to look like in 10 years? This concept of bringing these hardworking jobs into the manufacturing, whether it's industry, life sciences, aerospace, that is the future. And I think for the sake of Utah residents being on the front edge of that, they're going to be losers in this new economy. Let's make sure that they're not residents of Utah, that we're on the cutting edge because we are harnessing these hard sciences.
So what challenges are we facing as a state that you believe we need to harness the entrepreneurial and the innovation and the scientific sector to help solve? What problems need to be solved through innovation?
What problems need to be solved, or what?
What sort of macro problems do we have in the state that need to, where we need to harness the spirit of the entrepreneurial and the science and tech
I think there are a lot of them. I would look to the people in the room to help us to inform that. But one of the things that I hear, I think, is on the forefront is healthcare, right? To continue to have where I may have a great idea, but I also have a sick child, so I can't explore my new idea because I need to stay in my 9-to-5 job, 40 hours a week. To provide for my family. So, and healthcare costs, if you were a small business owner, those healthcare costs, I think of my friend Dawn, who I was at dinner with 6 months ago, and she was saying that her husband has started a small business. Their health insurance costs $2,000 a month, more than their mortgage. And yet she says, when my kids are sick, the copays are so high, I can't afford to take my kid to the doctor. So I think that's a real impediment to entrepreneurship, that at a macro level, it's bigger than the state of Utah, but at a macro level, we need to figure out healthcare. It's probably the first one I would point out.
Yeah, I agree with that. When you look at the state of Utah right now, it's incredible. You mentioned the economy. We've been under 4% unemployment for 4.5 years, which just happens to be when I became a lieutenant governor. I'm not saying there's a correlation there, but it's amazing. But Salt
Lake County carried a lot of the weight.
Well, that's debatable. It's true. So growth is a blessing and a curse, right? It's a blessing. We're the youngest state in the nation. We have more kids per capita than anywhere in the nation, and that's a really good thing. One of the reasons we have so many businesses that want to locate here is because we do have a workforce. When I mentioned all the other states have this problem too, at least we're graduating huge numbers of young people every year to help fill some of these jobs and jump in. But with that comes challenges. I was with a site locator in New York a year ago. And the site locator, big site locator, they work with some of the biggest businesses in the world, finding them locations. And I just got a chance to pick his brain for a little while. And I said, how's Utah doing, and how do we make sure we keep doing it? And he said, it's really interesting. Utah's hot right now. Every company that comes to us, we bring up Utah, we bring up Salt Lake City and other places in Utah. He said, but I'll tell you what, he said Austin, Texas was the hottest place in the world a couple years ago. And he said, we never look at Austin, Texas right now. We don't even look at them. And I said, why? He said, because they stopped caring about infrastructure. They got happy with the growth that they had seen. They stopped investing. Everything's controversial now. Education, their airport expansion, they decided not to invest in expanding their airport. Their traffic's terrible. All of these things. And he said, I could see that happening in Utah. If you're not careful, we're growing very rapidly. We are the fastest growing state in the nation. We're actually number 2 last year when it came to birth rate. We're always number 1, but I don't know, something happened in North Dakota. I think it involved alcohol. But we were number 2. We were number 9 in migration, which is, I think, the highest we've been. And when you put those two things together, that's growth. So we have these infrastructure problems. You mentioned healthcare being an issue. We're working with the University of Utah right now on a really cool idea, and I have to throw this out there. It's over the next 3 months, the American Dream, I can't even, what are we calling it? The American Dream Challenge, is that it? Yeah. And some private money came in. We're looking for entrepreneurs to come up with ideas to help the middle class increase their net take-home pay or their net gain over the next year. So either decreasing expenses or increasing take-home pay. 10%, increasing the middle class, their take-home pay by 10%. So we can do that by getting them better jobs, right? Education, that's important. But this is the place I'm most interested in. The 3 areas where we spend the most money: healthcare, housing and transportation. If you have good ideas, we could give you $1 million to implement your idea to help decrease those. And how are we going to do that? With all these new people coming in, housing prices are skyrocketing, 15% over the last year. How are we going to do that? Transportation, it's getting harder. I drive 100 miles every day, one way, 200 miles round trip every day. I know I'm part of the problem, but I also see it firsthand what it's like through those I-15 corridors. It's increasing at rates that are unsustainable. And then how do we pay for education? That's an evergreen conversation. So those are some of the big areas where we need entrepreneurs to step in and say, hey, I've got some great ideas. We can disrupt housing, we can disrupt transportation, and especially healthcare.
So in terms of fostering those, the entrepreneurs that will create that disruptive technology, you talked about infrastructure, what do we need for us to have healthy innovation infrastructure, the infrastructure that supports those entrepreneurs, that supports a healthy climate of innovation and innovation ecosystem that we talk about? What can government do specifically and policymakers do specifically to help those entrepreneurs that have those disruptive ideas about transportation and healthcare and other issues that we're facing to find success here in Utah?
Well, and what you're asking, we've talked, I think, about the ecosystem that allows entrepreneurs to come up with a new idea and get it to market. What you're referring to is how do we innovate within government? And I've already mentioned some of the problems with that is the way government is structured by design. It's not going to be easy to innovate there. But what we have to do is we need leaders like the mayor and others who can see through that, who recognize the limitations of government and are willing to bring people to the table who aren't always at the table, and to have those conversations. Just because this is the way we've always done it doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. We've been very fortunate. In fact, Utah has been recognized last year as using evidence-based policymaking. We were ranked #1 for evidence-based policymaking at the state level. We're really proud of that. But it's easy to be #1 when it's a really, really low bar. And we could always do better. One of the things that government is good at is collecting data. We have a lot of information. What we're not good at is using that data in ways that is innovative and improves what government does. So one of the things that I would like to see us do as a state and counties and cities is to carefully and respectfully open up that data to entrepreneurs who can then take that, synergize it, and use it in ways. So somebody I read, I think it was yesterday, somebody said that too often data is like having a forest and needing a house, right? It's great to have the forest and you've got all of that wood and lumber and you could build lots of houses, but if you don't know how to build a house and can't process it, it's no good to anybody. So we have all of this data that's no good to anybody if we're not allowing entrepreneurs to use it to help intersect government and to change it in ways. So we've got to be better at that. We've got to. One of the things I've encouraged the legislature and I would like to see us doing more of is kind of Shark Tank style innovation. For example, in education. So instead of just saying here's a bunch of education money, go do what you saying we're going to set aside $1 million and we're going to put together some experts and we're going to allow people that want to innovate in this space to come in and come in with their ideas and try to bring the best ideas forward, and then we'll implement that in a pilot project and see how it works, and then if it works, scale it, and let's we don't know as policymakers, we do not have all the answers. We're the same people we were the day before we got elected, and yet in the United States we just endow elected officials with all this knowledge. Now they're the experts on education because they went to school. Really? I mean, but that's what we do with 104 legislators, and they're just part-time people. They're teachers and farmers, and they do their thing. So let's give the experts an opportunity to perform, and if they can show they can perform, then we spend our tax dollars in a much better way, in a way that fixes government and solves some of these big problems we're going to have, because it's not going to be part-time legislatures or governors, lieutenant governors, mayors solving these problems.
I think that's right. We got a great leader in the Lieutenant Governor who is really walking the walk. And I think one of the things the government can do is be a convener of this. You know, we're not going to have the solutions, but the power to convene, I think, is probably the most important power if we figure out how to use it, bringing people together to tell us, to help us figure it out. I think of these three areas that Lieutenant Governor mentioned where Americans spend most of their disposable income, and it's transportation. Again, he said transportation, healthcare, housing. All of these are industries that are highly regulated by government, whether it's in housing, it's zoning and code and other things. For good reason, I would say they're regulated for good reason. Transportation is another one. Healthcare is another. But sometimes government regulation has the effect of maintaining the status quo rather than and killing innovation, right? So tell us, where I think every regulation, or maybe not every, but many regulations have a good intention. To protect the health and safety of our residents. Some of them are to create barriers to entry, right? That were created through lobbyists, through lobby who want a barrier to entry so innovators and disruptors can't come in and disrupt the sector. Help us differentiate, help us figure out where our regulations, how we can regulate in a way to protect the health and safety of our residents and not regulate in a way that creates barriers to entry to disruptive innovations that would make things less expensive and better for our residents. And we're open ears. And I think you've got great leadership in the state of Utah at the state level. I think there are innovative thinkers in the legislature as well and in our local governments that are ready to tell us where our regulations are getting in the way, how we might accomplish our same goals in a less burdensome way where we can bring down these costs.
So we've got a few minutes left, and we wanted to give the opportunity to the audience to ask a couple of questions of the Lieutenant Governor and Mayor McAdams. So we've got two mics set up here. We've only got about 10 minutes, and so if you'll please be limited in your questions and your comments, and please identify yourself if you would. So this gentleman here.
Dan McGraw with Light Diagnostics. Your answer, Mr. McAdams, to the question about what are the problems struck me as addressing the problems that are visible on the surface.
Sure.
What about, there's a lot of problems within our society and within industry that aren't visible on the surface. And in industries that are kind of losing their social license, they have an interest in not airing their dirty laundry. And one industry is mining. We have a huge history of mining here, very little innovation. It's not seen as high tech. It's kind of unpopular. And yet there's huge potential for innovation there. And I'm just wondering, and I don't have the answer, for instance, up to 1/3 of the ore that we mill and process is actually waste. And also, of the waste that we process, much of that has valuable metals in it, is ore. And so, but as one miner put it to me, we're mining blind. And so there's potential, there's huge expenditures of energy that are wasted. There's a lot of air pollution from dust. And yet we focus exclusively on water for mining. Where do you think there's a potential for government to have a role to spur innovation in this sector where it's very difficult because of because it's a politically unpopular industry, and so they tend to cover up and not be real open to sharing what their problems are. Do you think there's a role for government to help open that up and open up innovation, as has occurred in Finland, for instance?
Well, I haven't studied the ins and outs of the mining industry in Finland, but I do believe that there is, I don't believe, I know, there is heavy government involvement and regulation in the mining industry, and anybody in mining here would push back, I think, pretty hard against that insinuation that there isn't. Now, the question is with innovation, and I'll introduce you to Dr. Laura Nelson afterwards, who is the governor's energy advisor, and and is much more of an expert on these issues than I am. We have seen tremendous innovation in the mining industry. That doesn't mean that there can't and shouldn't be more, and I think it's something that in order to survive, the very market pressures you're talking about are going to kill mining if they're not innovating. So I do believe that part of the answer to your question is in the question itself. You mentioned that there's a hesitancy because mining isn't popular, and the social pressures that are coming down on the mining industry right now, and that's where that's one of the things that spurs innovation. We've seen that over throughout the history of our country, and so I do think we are seeing some innovation. I think we'll see more. I don't think that it's government's job to go in and force innovation. I do think it is government's job to make sure that we are protecting our environment and that we have balanced regulations to do that. And that's where much of this innovation has come from that Dr. Nelson mentioned in our own airshed and the cleaner air that we have now than that we've had at any time in the past 100 years in our state. But we still have a long ways to go. I don't know, Mayor, if you have anything.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a lot to add. I don't also have a lot of substantive knowledge in the mining area, which is a good thing. I'm going to let them be the experts. But I know, I come back to exports and how important I think that is to our local economy. The single largest export from the state of Utah is mining related. And that's largely Rio Tinto, and that's mostly in Salt Lake County. So, I'm holding my breath every year to hope that Rio Tinto, that they're profitable and successful. Now, they do have some impacts. They kick up a lot of dust, and that has some air quality impacts that I know that they work hard to mitigate those air quality impacts. But we know that the price for precious metals is highly competitive, and the United States regulates mining higher than a lot of the places around the globe. And so they're always having to make a justification for keeping this mine open. And when things like a major landslide happened a few years ago, it put us kind of on the edge. So I know they're innovating and they're finding ways to extract in better ways, and I appreciate the strides they're taking to also reduce their emissions. I know that a mine consumes a lot of energy, so they're looking for alternative and cleaner energy sources to power that mine and to keep their dust down. But it is an incredibly important part of our economy. So I know that the market pressures on them to innovate are incredibly high, probably higher than we can put on them through government regulation, but we want them to survive and to thrive because they're important to our tax base and our economy and jobs, and many companies around the Salt Lake Valley have that 10% of their market is coming from Rio Tinto, directly or indirectly. So it's an industry we want to see continue to thrive and survive because it's important to our tech economy as well.
There. Mr. Edwards?
Jeff Edwards with the Utah Advanced Materials Initiative. Lieutenant Governor, you're from a rural community, and Mayor McAdams, you're from the largest metro in our state. And you've both talked about this before, the inequity of development between rural and urban parts of our state. I'm wondering if, from your perspectives, each of the places you sit, what role can government play in trying to help solve that problem? Some people call it the Great Divide. Some people call it economic diversification. There's lots of different approaches to that. But I'm curious to know more about your individual thoughts on that, about how you can bring the prosperity of the metro to rural, remote places and where you live every day, Spencer, about what you think. So I'll throw that to you guys.
Yeah, the Lieutenant Governor talks about his 100-mile drive. I have a 4-minute commute to work.
I hate you so much right now.
I'm glad he can't run for Salt Lake County Mayor, let me say that. So, there is a divide, and I know that we've got to work on it. I think that technology may be the solution to that. As much as technology is causing the problem, it also may be the solution as we look at energy and alternative energy and what's happening in rural Utah with solar farms and providing renewable energy to our metro areas and the jobs that are created with that, data storage and making sure that we have fiber optic or an information highway that can connect our rural communities. I think those are some of the, while it's causing the problem, I think it's also the solution.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I appreciate that, Jeff. As you know, the governor announced last year an initiative to create 25,000 jobs off the Wasatch Front over the next 4 years, and we've been very engaged with that. Visited all 25 counties, sat down with leaders there, working on some strategic ideas and initiatives, and how are we going to make this work? And I'm a little biased, so I was happy to hear the mayor mention that. But in my past life, that's what I did, rural telecom, and we're very fortunate in the state of Utah. A lot of people don't realize this, that we do have a robust fiber network throughout rural Utah. There are some communities that aren't as connected, but many of them are, and you can get fiber to the home or fiber to your business at speeds and prices very competitive with what you can get in downtown Salt Lake City right now. And I do truly believe that is going to change the future, because these are places that people now look, rural Utah is not for everyone. I get that. But it is for someone. And there are many people, some of you in this room, who grew up in rural Utah, or your grandparents grew up in rural Utah, your parents, and you want to go back, but you can't because there aren't jobs. We say our biggest export is our kids, and that scares people. They want to be able to live next to their kids and grandkids and raise them there. And so I truly believe that the technology future will allow us to do much more of that. The strides that we've made in telecommuting, the ability now to be part of a much larger network, to do the same jobs you would do in a big building here, you can do it on my farm right now, and so I'm hopeful that businesses and entrepreneurs will start being a little more innovative in that sector. We have all these incredible innovative companies that are still building giant buildings and making everybody go into cubicles, and I don't think that's very innovative, although what they're doing is. And so I would like to see more of this where you can do that work, telecommuting, living in rural Utah. And by the way, there are really smart people, great companies. There is innovation happening out there. You just never hear of it because it's south of the Payson-Dixon line. Land is cheap, energy's cheap. They're hard workers, blue-collar workers, white-collar, smart people, opportunities for businesses to thrive down there. You just have to look outside and think about this. It solves all the other issues we talked about, right? The tremendous growth that's happening on the Wasatch Front. There's more water available in these areas. There's the only traffic jams we have are sheep in the spring and fall that slow you down a little bit. Wouldn't you like to live there? I had a 2-minute commute once. It's great. Yeah. So.
And I'll say, even though this question wasn't asked to me, I think also in the deep tech sector, not only are there opportunities for telecommuting, but one of the winners of the Governor's Medal for Science and Technology that we'll honor later today is George Hansen, who actually has an advanced composites manufacturing plant in Cleveland, Utah. So in some of these deep tech sectors, having those innovative companies that are willing to go out into rural Utah and provide those opportunities is also a major...
And look, I said this to the Manufacturer Association recently. You're missing the boat. I mean, they were complaining, we can't get enough people, we're having to pay them too much, we can't make it work. The opportunity for manufacturers to move into rural Utah is huge right now. Cost savings, incredible workforce ready to go right now. I said there's this magical place where, land's cheap, energy's cheap, there's buildings available, people who want these jobs and who work probably a little bit less and be really happy for it. It's just not between Spanish Fork and Ogden. And 98% of the people in this room had no idea there was a Cleveland, Utah. So come out and I'll take you on a tour. It won't take long. It's great. So.
And then as the final wrap-up question, when you came into office, Lieutenant Governor, there was a wonderful opportunity for you and the mayor to go up against one another in a demolition derby, and we have not seen that again since that time. So I'd like to see if...
We have not. Yeah. Our wives, my wife in particular, has said that will never happen again, as long as she's my wife. It was a lot of fun. Do you want to tell the story?
This was like my dream, my bucket list item of a demolition derby, and I know Lieutenant Governor was a fan as well, so I challenged him to a showdown demolition derby. It was a lot of fun. We were competing with everybody else who were like professional professionals, or can you be a professional demolition derby
most of
driver?
them, this was like their sixth derby of the year, not of the year, not, you know.
So we're competing, we're going against each other.
Oh, I do have to add one thing. I had to get permission from the governor, and he said, literally, he said, I've replaced one lieutenant governor, I guess I can do it again. So the moral of the story is I'm expendable. I learned that very quickly, which leads to this, which is really
So we're out there in the competing in that. We're not very good, but we're having fun. And I think I rear-ended the lieutenant governor here, and then somebody came and hit him on the side and rolled his car literally upside down, 10 feet away from your daughter.
And his car ended up on top of mine.
Yeah.
It was,
gas leaking onto your clothing.
It was not good. I thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
Literally, the cab was, so there is a roll bar on these things, but I was actually up on a berm, and the berm was in the front of the car, not where the roll bar is. So it was crushing in on me. I had a helmet on. It was crushing down. And my kids thought I was dead. They need therapy. And it was, it was a bad deal. And then I couldn't get out, and they're saying, you got to get out, you got to get out. I'm like, I can't, I'm pinned in. And he's like, undo your seatbelt. I'm like, oh, yeah. So turns out if you undo your seatbelt, it's easier to get out of a crushing car. So, yeah.
So with that, I'm up. You want to do it again this summer? Let's do it.
Well, it's sad to hear you're not going to rise to the challenge there. That's a.
I'm very self-aware. I've learned my limits, and I like my wife. I'd like to keep her. So.
Well, we want to thank Lieutenant Governor Cox and Mayor McAdams for your insights today, and also for your leadership in the state and the county. And we appreciate all you do to promote the wonderful work that's going on with our entrepreneurs and our tech community and our science community. So we appreciate you being here, and let's give them a round of applause.
Thanks.